You know, one of the biggest issues with being a big kid in a lot of ways in my heart is going to see movies that are obviously for families and for kids and having to deal with kids. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're finally talking about the latest film coming from Disney and Pixar, known as Elemental. Directed by Sohn, who also directed The Good Dinosaur. This film stars people like Leah, Mamoudou, Athie, Ronnie, Carmen, Sheila Omi, and many more. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new review here on the channel. I'm a little bit late to this one. The movie's been out for a little bit over a week, but this was definitely a movie I wanted to try to catch in theaters if I had the opportunity to. And so today after work, I decided, let's go to the theaters. Let's check out Elemental, the new film coming from Disney and Pixar. Pixar is definitely, without a doubt, one of my favorite animation studios. They have been since I was a kid, as I grew up in the era of them really taking off with things like Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. and so many other films that came out that are iconic classics today in the animation genre and have just completely stood the test of time in the hearts of fans all around. And while they've had some incredible films in their filmography, some of their films in recent years, I would say somewhere within the last decade or so, have been just, a solid good time or just okay. They don't always hit it out of the park. So going into Elemental, I didn't really go in with the highest of expectations, just hoping to be entertained. And I can start this off by saying that I'm happy to say I really enjoyed Elemental. Before I saw the film, I did see a lot of negative things online, some mixed reviews, people saying that Pixar has kind of lost its edge and that it's lost steam. And watching the film, I can honestly say that I really enjoyed it. Now, you're probably wondering what that intro to this video was all about. When I went to go see the film, it was actually surprisingly a pretty packed screening, majority with families with kids. Now, my fiance and I don't have kids. We don't want kids. We're not really kid people. I may enjoy some of the kids in my family, or, maybe a friend has a kid that I think is kind of cute at times. But when it comes to the insanity that is children, it's just not for me, really. And so going to see this movie, it was a bit of a letdown to say that there was just so many kids in the theaters and their parents were not keeping them hush. Now, I recognize this is a film that's going to, of course, pull in families with kids of all ages. But as somebody who's a big kid at heart and loves animation as a medium overall, I love to still be able to go see these movies in theaters. And I find more and more, the older I'm getting, the more annoying it is to go to these screenings where you just have kids shouting and crying and whining the entire movie with parents really not saying much to them. So I had to start this off by at least referencing that. It was a bit of a brutal screening, I won't lie. There was a group of teens sitting a few seats away from us that were laughing just really obnoxiously at everything that was going on, anything that was stupidly said, any innuendos. I'm all for audience reaction and laughter and comments from time to time, but it was just getting a bit excessive. And then there was kids crying and whining and just talking throughout the entirety of the screening. But despite all of that, and despite having not the greatest screening experience, this was a movie that honestly still kind of kept me really engrossed in what was going on. Overall, I'll start this off by saying that it's a very well animated film. The voice work here I think is top notch from beginning to end, with me really getting engrossed in the characters mainly because of things like that, the visuals and the voice work. When it comes to the story side of things, there's a really creative and inventive way that they kind of bring the story together, but they utilize a fairly familiar story that we've seen in many romance films before, or even just films that are in the animated medium. And beyond that, while it does have some familiar tropes and some familiar beats that definitely lead to predictability in its narrative, I ultimately can say that the journey is what I found myself the most engrossed with me finding myself really just enjoying the characters of this movie. This isn't top tier when it comes to Pixar for me, but it's definitely a really good time that had me emotional at times and really excited to continue to watch. I never even felt broken fully from the immersion of the movie and its story and its characters, even with the insanity and disruptions going on around me in the theater. Now, as I mentioned before, this film is directed by Sohn, who also also directed The Good Dinosaur, which is a film that honestly was always kind of in the lower tier of Pixar films for me. A film similar to this one that I really enjoyed, but definitely never was at the top of the Pixar echelon. And when it comes to this one, Elemental, I definitely found it to be a lot better than The Good Dinosaur, having far more in the character department. And if you're a sucker for a good romance film, as I am, I think there's a lot of great moments in this film that'll put a smile on your face or at least warm your heart. Now let's talk about some of the characters, because that's where, like I mentioned before, that's where I found myself the most engrossed in this movie. You have Leah Lewis, who plays the character of Ember, and I really enjoyed her character. You have this hot-headed character who has issues with her temper. She's trying to live up to this expectation that her father is kind of set on her. She's supposed to take over the family business, like I mentioned before, stuff we've seen before, but I found her to be an interesting character that was definitely relatable in terms of, you know, her not ever really taking a moment to ask herself what she wants to do in life, and realizing that everything she's so driven and stressed by a lot of times is kind of because she's trying to live up to this specific tradition or expectation that her father's kind of put on her shoulders. Along the way, Ember ends up meeting the love interest of this film, a guy named Wade Ripple, played by Mamoudou Athie, and the two of them end up creating this, you know, unorthodox romance, as of course it's seen to everybody around them that water and fire are not going to work out. You have these two characters that in so many ways, emotionally and physically, are wildly different, and while that is a very on the nose comparison to the things we see in real life, I do think it really works when it comes to this film. They have completely different ways of handling things. There's completely two different emotional states, there's two different looks to them, and they can literally destroy one another with what they kind of have to offer in a way. But at the same time, when they come together and they, you know, find that balance, there's a special spark that's unique and different, and ultimately has them falling in love. And in a lot of ways, it's a cliche love story that we've seen in animated films and in films time and time again, but I really found the bond between these two characters to be pretty solid, as the character of Wade is just this kind of bumbling idiot that's just welling up with emotion consistently, and is really great with connecting with people because he's really connected to his own emotions and the emotions of those around him, which is something that Ember is able to learn from him over the course of the film. And at the same time, Ember is kind of inspiring a fire within Wade himself, giving him a drive that he maybe didn't have before. The other two most notable characters outside of that are Ember's parents, who are the characters of Bernie as well as the character of Cinder, and I really enjoyed the two times spent with these characters. You have the father again, who's, you know, got the shop. They essentially set up Ember's parents and their family to be immigrants who came to this world, this element city, which was really cool. You have all these different elements everywhere and different people that are made up of different things, but you have these immigrant individuals who are the fire people who come to Element City and aren't really fully accepted initially. There's people who are afraid of them. There are people who don't want them around because they think they'll cause problems. Definitely some real world commentary there that I think is going to rub maybe some people the wrong way, but I thought it was rather effective in the way that they chose to use it in this film. And then when, you know, these characters end up meeting the water people, they're a little bit meant to be more of like just, you know, the white typical American, which I thought was an interesting contrast. But going back to her parents, you have Bernie and Cinder, who, you know, have come to Element City to start a new life for their child. And so you have Bernie, the father, who's has this new establishment that he's built. He's built a fire shop where, you know, he's raised his daughter and she's been inspired by him all these years. And now that she's older, he's just ready and kind of waiting for the moment where it seems ready to him, where he can pass on the business. And that's where a lot of the turmoil between those two characters kind of starts to flare up, because you find that Ember is just struggling to meet the expectations of her father, but maybe also recognizing that those expectations aren't something she even cares to meet. And then the mom character, Cinder, for me was pretty funny because she's kind of like a psychic character who's able to sniff out love between two individuals, and at first, of course, is completely against the idea of these two completely different individuals finding love, but eventually, you know, it's nice to kind of see the way that she grows around the concept. Again, this is a simple movie with a simple concept that's familiar to things we've seen before, but I found it to be touching at times. I found it to be very cute, and despite the distractions that were surrounding me at the screening I saw it at, I found it to just be a good fun time at the movies that gave me that tug on the heartstrings that I really enjoy from a good Pixar film. There's great music throughout, great animation. I really loved the vibrancy and the colors and the character designs. I really enjoyed Element City and the world. It reminded me a lot of Zootopia and being able to see that world kind of come to life over the course of the movie. And yeah, this is definitely a movie that I would recommend recommend. I don't know that I recommend everybody rush to theaters to see it. If you've seen the trailer and it just doesn't seem like your kind of thing, or maybe it's something you want to wait to see on Disney Plus, then I can't necessarily blame you for that. But I do think it's a movie that's worth watching, because while again it is familiar at times, while it does have predictability, I still found myself feeling a little bit emotional at times, with a little bit of waterworks kind of building up in my eyes. And I'll go ahead and wrap this up by saying it was a good time. But I also want to take a quick second to also give a shout out to the short that they put in the front of this movie. Of course, Pixar is famous for their shorts that end up being before their movies, and the short this time around was called Carl's Date, focusing on Carl from Up, where we have him and Doug kind of trying to figure out what to do, because Carl has been asked out on a date for the first time after all these years, which kind of hurt my heart a little bit, because I instantly thought about his late great wife Ellie, and he does refer to her in this shot. And it kind of sucked because I did have all those disruptions going on in my theaters, and it was kind of annoying because I was really into this short, and I found myself getting pretty emotional, probably more emotional than I did from the movie with this one clip. And Up is just one of those movies that just wrecks my soul every time I watch it. But I looked over at my fiance as soon as it was over, and we both had, like, you know, the bottom of our eyelids covered with some water. And I just think that just goes to show that Up is a movie that will rip your heart out at any time that it possibly can, especially if that classic piano score is played throughout. Anyway, really enjoyed Carl's Date, the little Up short at the beginning. I thought that it was a lot of fun to watch, and those are characters that I grew up watching, and it was just really nice to see a short that was of familiar characters. So anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on Elemental. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Did you enjoy this film? Did you not enjoy this film? Like I said, I saw a lot of negative reviews for this before I actually saw the movie, so I kind of thought that this maybe was going to be a lackluster film, but I'm happy to say I don't agree with a lot of those negative reviews. I found it to be a good time. I think if you are a fan of animation and Pixar, and just something that tug on your heartstrings, that's not going to blow your mind, but, you know, feel familiar and kind of safe, almost like a nice comfort food kind of movie, I think this is the kind of movie to watch. And so that's my thoughts on the movie. Definitely can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. Comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.